welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study Series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're at the tail end of a series that is a little weird, right?
Very
because
weird.
We're doing two books in the same series. We're done with Judges.
Right.
But we're going to do Ruth this week.
Yeah, so why in the world would we do that, right?
Because Ruth 1, the very first phrase says, during the time of the Judges.
Yeah,
So,
exactly, right.
You know what?
Right.
So at some point, I don't know when exactly, but if we play with some of the dates that we do know, I'm going to say that Ruth takes place somewhere, let's say the second half. I think that's the closest.
It's definitely later, right?
Yeah.
Some people are putting it like in Samson's time. Other people were putting it in another judge because it said, "Ooh, during a time of famine."
Yeah.
There's always a time of famine.
I think probably
Yeah.
they all had
Right.
Gideon had famine.
Yeah.
So my thinking is we're going to get to the genealogy at the end. And in fact, the last day we're actually going to jump out of Ruth and go to Matthew. But the genealogy at the end, if we figure, and this is ballpark, if we let's say 40 years for a generation, because that seems to be throughout the Old Testament. You sort of see that. If you're going to back out of some of the names, you can easily get to about 120 years between, or just in those 3 or 4 generations that are going to be listed in chapter 4.
Right.
So
So maybe.
So if Judges lasted between 3 and 350 years, and we can burn 120 to 150, 160 years, somewhere in the second half, probably midpoint or the second half.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to Judges, right? So we finished.
Why do we want to go back?
Because we finished last week, and it's absolutely terrible.
So terrible. Why do we want to?
Yeah, but we ended with, there's no king in Israel, and everybody did what was right in their own eyes.
Their own eyes, yeah.
And turns out that is not a good thing at all, right? And there was a civil war that almost ended the tribe of Benjamin.
Yeah.
Right. So this week takes place at the time of Judges, and I've read Ruth before, and it's not fluff isn't the right word, right? But it's an easy read.
It's very easy,
and it's very positive, and it's a negative story that has a very good ending to it.
And here's a bonus: if anybody wants to learn Hebrew, Ruth is when we teach Hebrew. Ruth is one of the easier books, and so either second half of first year Hebrew, or definitely by second year Hebrew.
Yeah, you're
seminary students are working in the book of
nice.
Ruth. Yeah, Jonah and Ruth tend to be the first 2 books that
shorter and
pretty easy Hebrew.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So even in the original language, it's an easy read. It's not theologically difficult. There's some really great stuff in here, but it's meant to be a historical narrative, draw us into the story.
Right.
With some
it is
pretty big pops in there, I think.
Yeah. Well, and also like Esther, okay, God's not in Esther at all. I mean, God is in Esther.
But he's never mentioned.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And even in Ruth, it's like, he's not mentioned a whole lot in there.
Yeah.
But when we take it in context of where we are in Judges, it's like, she's doing pretty good.
Yeah. If you see it in the context of Judges, this is like the highlight. This is the good spot here.
All right,
That's
so Ruth, chapter 1, what's going on here? So there's a lady by the name of Naomi. She has a husband and she's got 2 kids, and she is living in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And that is the Bethlehem.
The Bethlehem.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Which is a little trigger for
Yeah.
I wonder what's coming up later.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And they were from the clan of Ephraim.
Ephrat. Yep.
Okay.
Ephrat. Which name shows up, which is really interesting because if somebody knows the Christmas verses, right, they're going to think, hold on a second, that sounds familiar. And you go to Micah chapter 5, verse 2, O you Bethlehem, in the area of Ephrat, you who are so small amongst all of the tribes and everything, from you will come a ruler.
Okay.
Who's from everlasting to everlasting. Those 2 names that we see here in Ruth are in Micah 5:2, a part of the Messiah's prophecy.
Nice.
So if you're thinking, where have I heard that name before? Yeah, you have to look in Micah.
Right. So there was a famine.
Yeah.
So they decide to leave Israel.
during one of these,
Yep,
whichever
spiral
one,
down,
whichever one we're working in.
So
yeah.
they went. They went to live in a place called Moab, and Moab is on the east side of the Jordan River. So, quote, the other side of the Jordan River,
Yep.
almost as far south as the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
Right? The southern part of the Dead Sea.
Yeah, we're going to say it's in today's world. If you want to look at a map, it's going to be southern Jordan. Yeah, southern Jordan.
Yep. So they get there. Both of her kids marry. And 10 years later, the husband has died, and both sons have died.
Both sons have died, right?
And now she is in a foreign land with nobody. Right. I mean, she does have two daughter-in-laws.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But she hears word that the famine is over.
Yeah.
So and that it's feasting time in Israel.
Yeah.
So she wants to go back.
Yeah, they're actually, not only is the famine over, but it sounds like there's going to be
abundant
a good
crops
harvest. Yeah.
Yeah, so she decides to go back, and she talks to her daughters-in-laws and says, "Look, go back to your hometowns.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a release, but it's live your life."
Well, so because neither of the daughters-in-law had children,
Right.
Right. So Naomi's point is going to be, I don't have any more sons to give you.
Yep.
You need to go get married.
Right. Go
Don't
start
spend the
over.
rest of your life as a widow, a young widow. Right. Go get married. I don't have anybody to give you. I don't have any relatives back home that has anybody to give you that she
knew about
or that she considered go marry within your own tribe, within your own family, within your own whatever, and let me just go back and die in peace, basically.
Yeah, so one of the daughter-in-laws takes her up on it, Oprah, and we don't hear anything more. But Ruth says, "I'm sticking around.
Yeah.
I'm with you." And there's a great verse in there that everybody from Ruth always
it's
reads.
like the theme of the book, right?
Yeah. So stop urging me to abandon you, which I really like. Hey, I'm coming with you.
I'm coming with you.
Stop
right.
it. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will become my people, and your God will become my God. So, okay, we got God in here.
Yep.
Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely. If I do not keep my promise, only death will be able to separate me from you.
Yeah.
So, Ruth went with Naomi to Bethlehem.
Yeah, she
back
did.
to Israel.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, we meet a rich guy
Yep.
that's a landowner. His name is Boaz. He's prominent from the same clan, and it turns out Naomi's a relative of Naomi's husband.
Yeah.
Right. So not Naomi, but her husband,
Right.
on her husband's side.
And let's not forget that family land, family whatever,
It's huge.
stays within the tribe. It has to stay within the tribe, and as much as possible, stay within the clan. Right.
Right.
So she didn't necessarily. She had been moved out of her family and joined her husband's family, and this whole thing.
Right.
What happened when they left? What happened to that land? What happened? It looks like she's coming back to nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Right. That she's coming back to nothing, and then this guy has some land though. He's got seeming like a bunch of land.
Yeah.
And there's some rules for the landowners.
Yep.
And I go back to the New Testament. On a Sabbath day, Jesus and his apostles are walking through a field,
Yep.
and they're picking the heads off of wheat and eating it, or a grain, whatever it was, and eating it. And there was a whole Sabbath problem there, but no one ever said it was illegal for them to
They weren't. Yeah.
to pick it. It was the problem was it was Sunday. Or Sabbath.
Sabbath
It was a Sabbath
for them.
I would say Sunday.
Um,
So what's the law say about that?
Well, pull out my legal. If we go over to the book of Leviticus, which is the legal document for Israel, chapter 19, what we find is, here's the law. When you gather the harvest of your land, you must not completely harvest the corner of your field, and you must not gather up the gleanings of your harvest. So you're harvesting, whatever machinery, whatever hands you're using, whatever stuff is going to drop, you're not allowed to go pick it up, and you can't go to every corner and get every little thing. Here's why. You must not pick your vineyard bare. You must not gather up all the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You must leave them for the poor and for the resident foreigner. So migrants that are working through, travelers that are working through, whatever. He says, I am the Lord your God. So God said part of the duty of landowners,
Right, is to leave some
is
of
to leave some of the stuff
some of the
for the poor and for the travelers.
Yep.
So
what we're going to see during this time is the men will go through the field first.
So that's
and they
gonna be
pick
his
his
employees,
employees,
right?
and then it seems like there's a group of women that are his employees too that are going through following them, but still. Then there is another group that comes by later,
Yeah.
and these would be the women who have no husbands,
Yep.
for whatever reason, and they get, quote, what's left.
Right.
Whether it's on the ground that they're picking up, like you said, the corners they can grab.
Yep.
And you would think it's maybe enough for substance, but it's be tough to live on.
Yeah, it's not going to be much.
Right.
Right. Especially after you've had two groups of people
Yeah,
come
exactly.
through already. Yeah.
Right. So Ruth went to work in the fields,
Yep.
right? She has no other work that she can do that she's eligible for, and she even says, "I'm going to go work in the field of anyone who will allow me to."
Yeah.
Right. So there must have been a bunch of these people. They're only going to allow so many. You got to believe it's very dangerous for these women to be in the fields, not because of wild animals, but because of people.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Because we don't know how big the fields are. You don't want to be out there in a field by yourself.
Right.
Right. She's poor. She's a foreigner.
Yep.
I mean, she meets the Leviticus 19.
Yeah. She's the person that this was made for.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I mean, technically, she's married into the family and everything, but she's poor and she's a foreigner.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
So at this point, she just happens to be in Boaz's field.
Yeah.
And she didn't know.
She doesn't
She didn't know
know, yeah.
anything about it. So Boaz is checking with his field hands. He's keeping track of who's in the field, and it turns out he finds out who. Okay, Naomi's daughter-in-law. Everybody died.
Yep.
She's back, and also that she's a very hard worker.
Yeah.
Too.
Now, how cool is it that he notices the third level?
Exactly.
Like, I haven't seen her before. Who's that?
Right. So that says to me he is an owner, a good owner from the standpoint of that, right? He is working his own field.
Yep.
He's not physically out there working, but he's doing the job of a leader.
Yeah.
Right? Making sure that people are doing their job, noticing people.
And making sure that the migrants, the foreigners, the
Yeah,
poor people
have an opportunity.
have the opportunity
Yep.
and have enough.
Yeah.
Right?
So then he takes a shine to her, a likeness
special
to her,
interest, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and tells his people, okay, I don't want her to be in that third group. Put her in the second group, and tell the other women to leave her alone.
Well, once,
and by the
especially
way,
when he finds out she's family.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
He's told she's family. He's
Right. Oh, that's true.
that's true. Okay, yeah. So yeah, let's move her up a little bit, right?
Yep. Drinks of water. So there's definitely some special consideration going on here.
Yeah, he basically treats her like one of his female workers.
Right.
I mean, she just got a complimentary upgrade.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a really good way to put it. Yep. And he also told her an interesting thing: stay in my field.
Yeah.
And I read that, I'll keep you safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't go wandering around to somebody
There's
else's field.
absolutely
You
no
stay
re-
here with my people under my watch care.
Yep.
Yeah.
So she picks 30 pounds of barley. I have no idea if that's a lot, but it sure sounds like a lot.
Well, first of all, barley is animal food and poor people food.
Right.
Okay. This is we're in northern Indiana, right?
Right.
And so we do corn and soybeans and some of this other stuff. This is not the corn that you're selling in the store. Okay.
Right.
This is feed corn.
Yeah.
This is corn that's going to the ethanol plant. This is corn that's
I've
going
had
to
feed
animals.
corn. Some
This
feed
is-
corn is absolutely.
Well, okay,
but no, I get exactly what you mean.
This is not the best sweet corn that you're gonna. This is the bottom of the barrel, and she's picking up off the ground the bottom of the barrel, right?
Yep.
But yeah, 30 pounds of this stuff.
I mean, a pound loaf of bread. I mean, that's big. That's a.
yeah.
That
yeah,
seems
and they
like
would
it's
grind it down and
Yeah,
be
it would
able
be
to
less.
bake and
It'd be way
make
less.
stuff out of it. But yeah, there's roast it and everything. There's
Yeah.
gonna be a lot of food.
Yeah, so she worked through the barley and the wheat harvest, which is awesome.
Yep.
And I got to believe that saved them from starving.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so then we get to chapter 3, and Naomi schools Ruth on what to do.
Yeah, so Ruth comes back home with these 30 pounds.
Yeah.
And Naomi's like, where did you work?
Yeah, right.
And so she tells her the whole story. She's like, I know this guy, my husband, whatever. Yeah, he said stay close to him. I'm going to tell you how to stay really, really close to this guy.
Yeah, so basically take a shower, put on some perfume and nice clothes, and now you're going back to his workplace.
Yeah.
And again, he is physically there on the threshing floor,
Yeah.
which is where they take the produce out of the fields, and now they're beating it or whatever they're doing to separate the heads from the shafts.
So if he were a rancher, if he were a shepherd, he'd be sleeping with the sheep, right, protecting them.
Yeah.
This is harvest. And don't forget, this is the time of the judges, which means that there's, if you remember, Gideon was threshing wheat in hiding because he didn't want the Midianites to come through.
Right.
We have Boaz here. He can't afford to have somebody come in and steal his stuff. Right. So everybody else went home.
Yeah, he's watching. Yeah, so he's sleeping
So
there.
he's sleeping on the threshing floor next to a pile of wheat.
Right.
But, contextually, if you place it in the time of the judges, that I think helps us understand why that was so important.
Right.
How did she know he was going to be there?
Because yeah. So Boaz falls asleep. She uncovers his legs, which could have some meanings, and lay down beside him. So what I get out of it is basically she's offering herself to marry Boaz.
Yeah.
Right.
She's doing what Naomi told her to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
He can marry you and still keep everything within the family.
Yep. So middle of the night, Boaz wakes up. Hey, who are you? She announces who she is and says her intent, hey, I want you to marry me. And he does not seem surprised at all, which
you'd
I don't know.
think that, as attentive as he's been, don't forget, we've gone all the way through the barley harvest in the summer. Now we're in the fall, we're in the wheat harvest. So there's been some months. Right. He's been taking care of her. They've talked. He knows the story. He's done his due diligence because as soon as she said, please marry me, right? He's like, well,
I can't.
Here's the stuff, right? Yeah. So he's already thought of this. This is not like
that's
a new revelation to him.
That is a very good point. So the problem is there's a relative closer than Boaz is. Yeah. So he has to check with this person first, or this person gets first dibs.
Yeah, basically.
And part of it is first dibs to marry Ruth, but there's other pieces to it.
Yeah, there's some rights to some land apparently that Naomi maybe she and her husband had sold the rights to the land, and she didn't have the money to buy it back when they came back. There's some other stuff going on here. Right. The word here, and this really shows up more theologically than verbally, but the word is redeemer.
Yeah.
It's called a kinsman redeemer. Okay. And it had to be somebody in the family who could redeem Ruth, redeem the land, and really redeem the family. Right. That concept shows up, again, theologically, when it comes to Jesus, because Jesus became human so that he could be our kinsman redeemer. A human got us into our sin mess. A human had to get us out of our sin mess, but no human could do it. Right. So God had to do it. So we have the God-man in Jesus. There is a sense that Boaz is functioning almost like a prototype of what Jesus is going to do spiritually, or what now today Jesus did spiritually. Boaz was her kinsman redeemer. Jesus is our kinsman redeemer.
Ours, right. One versus many.
Yeah.
So things don't look really good from the standpoint Ruth spending the night with Boaz. Yeah. He was a little worried about her leaving there, so he loads her up with some barley or some grain. Yeah. Like 60 pounds worth.
60 pounds. Here's some more.
That's pretty impressive, being able to carry that. I don't know how far she lived away, but
she had to carry 60 pounds. I mean, 60 pounds is 60 pounds. I don't care what it is, right? In her shawl. So she's dragging it or carrying it over, her shoulder or something.
Right. So she carries it home. And then we get to chapter 4. And I love chapter 4. Chapter 4 is awesome. I always find it interesting, like how the world works. Yeah. And we get a little snapshot for how Bethlehem worked at the time of Ruth and Naomi. Yeah. And we see Boaz going to the front gates, and we see that a number of times. That's where the elders hung out. That's where the business was being conducted.
Judges, law, everything.
And he went there with a purpose. Yep. And he found the other guy, and you have a footnote in here. You love it that he's never named.
Yeah. He in verse 1, Boaz, the guy came along. Boaz says, "Come here, what's your name?" And so in Hebrew, there is a phrase that basically says, what's your name? It's sort of a loose translation, but so and so or this and that or whatever. It is intentionally left vague. Okay. Wow. This guy opts, and we're sort of spoiler, right? This guy opts to not redeem because Ruth had no children. And so a firstborn son, between whoever marries Ruth, Ruth's firstborn son has to take the name of her dead husband so that he doesn't get does not get written out of the history books, and he also becomes the heir
Right.
of her dead husband. So this guy is going to marry her and be able to somewhat use the land until the son is old enough to inherit it. The rest of his family doesn't get to inherit it, so he's going to be dumping money into her and her family that he's never going to see again.
Yeah, and he doesn't want. So what's Boaz get out of it?
Same thing.
Right. But he chooses to.
He's also already
Older.
wealthy.
Right.
He's older, and for him, for anyone, it's just going to be the first son. All other sons and children are going to, will be his heirs, whatever. It doesn't look like Boaz has any heirs yet.
Yeah,
this
that's
other
what
guy
I was
did.
thinking. It doesn't say that, but
Right.
just kind of
We
reading
don't
into
know,
the story.
right?
Yeah. I also love that the business meeting involves passing a shoe.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Right?
Yeah, but sure.
Yeah, but the idea was you had all the elders there. Boaz says, "Here's the deal. You have first opportunity." The guy says, "I don't want it," and Boaz is like, "Everybody hear that? You got that right? Okay." He passed, which means I'm going to accept it.
Yep.
Anybody got any questions? Anybody got any reasons why? No.
I mean, he had everything
Yeah.
all drawn up. He knew what the answer was going to be. He knew what the thing was. And it's done.
So Ruth and Naomi are saved.
Yeah.
I mean, awesome. Then it gets a little bit better, right? At the very end of Ruth, we see that Ruth had a child, and his name was Obed, and Obed had a child, or Obed was the father of Jesse, which everybody should be going, I've heard that name
Sounds
before.
familiar.
And Jesse was the father of some dude by the name of David, who we know a little better as King David.
Yep.
How cool is that?
Yep. So we have this genealogy that connects Boaz, Ruth, and then down here to King David, right?
Right. So then you think, how can it even get better?
Right.
And then it gets a little bit better, right?
On the last day of our reading, we're going to jump out of Ruth because we ran out of chapters, and we're going to pop over to Matthew chapter 1.
Yeah, so Matthew chapter 1, you need to stay awake for, because it's a genealogy lesson. And we're reading 1 through 16 in there, but somewhere around verse 5, it gets a little cool. You going there?
I am.
Okay.
Right here it is. Well, I'm not going to read it. I mean, it's just
fine.
What we're going to find is the same names in Matthew chapter 1 as we see in Ruth chapter 4.
Right.
And
then if we continue in Matthew to the end of the lineage, where do we hit?
we've come to Jesus.
Right. So not only, isn't that's
We come to Jesus.
That's cool.
So Ruth and her family show up in Jesus' lineage through Joseph, right?
Right.
Technically, it's not his bloodline, but this is Jesus' family tree through his adoptive father.
Right. How cool is that?
Yeah.
A lady who easily could have been discarded in history.
Yep.
Easily could have died when, in a foreign land.
Yep. So Hebrew genealogies are strange for a couple of reasons. First of all, they typically list only the men. Mm-hmm. Okay. You read Matthew chapter 1, there are 4 ladies mentioned, 4 women. Ruth is just one of 4. Yeah. You've got Rahab, which goes back like 800 years. There are a couple of, and that brings up a second point, really, there are gaps. There are intentional gaps. They do not list every name. They don't even list every name down just one thing, much less the branches. As long as you can keep the connection, you're fine. Well, I mean, there's like 2 400-year gaps because they're only mentioning the important people. But Rahab, who was the prostitute in Jericho, from Joshua's time, Ruth
that let the spies in, or helped the spies let the spies out.
Ruth, there was a Canaanite woman named Tamar. So Rahab's a Canaanite, Tamar is a Canaanite prostitute. Well, not prostitute. She pretended to be a shrine prostitute. There was some incest going on there. Ruth, who's a Moabitess, and then Bathsheba, whom David had adultery with.
Right.
Those are the 4 ladies mentioned in Jesus' family tree in Matthew chapter 1.
Yeah.
So when I teach the book of Matthew, like in Uganda, every year, one of the principles that I bring out right away, before we even get really far into the book, is I don't care what your background is. I don't care what your ethnicity is. I don't care where you come from. God can use you. And I think that's a really cool thing
that's a
coming
great
out of
thing.
Ruth and then
Yeah, exactly.
Matthew.
That's a perfect place to stop.
Yeah, yeah. It's more than just a story. It is a historical account. It's a great story to read, but there's a lot of stuff. If you sit back and you really think about what's going on in Ruth, there's really a lot of cool stuff in there. So be encouraged that no matter where you come from, God can always use you.
Yeah.
So feel free to pass that along to somebody that you know needs encouragement as well. Subscribe to the channel, and we will be back next time with a brand new series, brand new book, and we're going to have some fun with that too.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. So see you next time.
All right, bye, everyone.